Are you ready? Are you shitting down?
The Schein on Podcast.
The Schein on Podcast.
The Schein on Podcast, Season 5.
We're going to pull back the curtain on the divorce process. It's fun, insightful, tremendous guests. They're topics that far too often many people shy away from. But not here on the Schein on Podcast.
It's episode 96 of the Schein on Podcast. I'm Evan Schein. Happy holidays, everybody. It's the last episode of 2025, and wow, it is a good one. Coming up, I am joined by Dr. Pepper Schwartz, an acclaimed sociologist, sexologist, and best-selling author who has over 25 books and done extensive research on love, sexuality, and relationship. We're going to talk about the importance of communication and intimacy in relationships and marriages, along with her standout role on the TV show Married at First Sight, and practical advice for both 18-year-olds and 80-year-olds regarding love, sex, and relationships. And Dave, Dr. Schwartz was as good as it gets, and December is coming to a close. 2025 is coming to a close, and that can only mean one thing. Another season of the Schein on Podcast is in the books.
Yeah. Take a victory lap. Take a bow, Attorney Schein.
That's right. And Dave, you take a bow right there with me, because you know what? I got to tell you, we are going on. I can't even keep track of what season we're going on, because we're having a blast. We're having fun. And I got to tell you, as we march ahead into the new year in January, we have some incredible things on the horizon, on the podcast, with great guests that you've been working over the holidays. I mean, there was no time to celebrate, right? There was no time to celebrate. No, stuffing, the presents under the Christmas tree for you. No stockings. No. None of that, right? You were hard at work lining up guests for the new season.
No. Yeah, I was just like the Grinch and Max up there in my lair plotting, but in a good way, for good and not for evil. Bah humbug, more shine on podcast. That's what the world needs.
And Dave, let me ask you, as 2025 comes to an end, right? And as you reflect, are you someone who spends a lot of time reflecting on the past year, reflecting on and thinking about resolutions, goals for 2026? You hear so much about that this time of year. Some people will say, I'm not a, New Year's resolution person. I'm not a, someone who likes setting, goals. I'm not very reflective over the past year. When you look back at 2025, and you look ahead to 2026, whether it was relationships or parenting or your post-divorce life that, that you find yourself in, that you've been open about, how does 2025 shape up for you, and what's ahead for 2026?
Yeah, I do like to reflect. I got the reflecting part down. I reflect until the cows come home. And then I make a list as to things I'd like to change, spend more time doing this with my kids, be a better resource to my ex-wife so we can co-parent even better. And I make a list of those things. I carefully jot them down. And then I set the list aside, and then I misplace it, and then I have to make a new list, and one thing leads to another, and so I don't know. Yeah, I got a little bit of both of me. Reflecting, I think, is always great, because we forget to sometimes, because there's always something going on in our lives that keeps us busy and stops us from taking that time to look at the big picture. So I like the big picture. And, sometimes, yes, I make changes for the better. And then sometimes I'm like the guy who's in the gym on January 3rd, 5th, 7th, and then January 29th, and then maybe once in February, and then never again.
You're one of those guys.
Sometimes, yes.
I was talking to someone over the holidays, and we were talking about success, and we were talking about a lot of things, life and family and parents and kids and being a parent. And we were talking about the power of pause, right? And the power of just pumping the brakes, hitting pause, right? And it came up in the conversation. How do you measure success, right? How do you measure, right, feeling good? What does that look like? And it's so it's such an individual, thing. And this person was saying he measures it by having the freedom, right, to
Mhm.
sort of control and do what he wants and to take breaks and to, and to reflect. And it was a fascinating conversation. This is someone who is divorced. The kids are now one teenagers and in their early 20s. And it was a really interesting conversation based on because he got divorced when his kids were much younger and hearing his perspective and how it changed over time. And he was saying, look, if he took, a moment to pause, not only during his marriage, but right after uh, him and his wife separated, things would have been different.
Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. Because it's like a lot of things. The bigger the decision, in theory, the more you should take time to, not in the heat of any moment, not with any deadline fast approaching, because and sometimes the best advice is really just hey, let me sleep on it, because things look different the next day sometimes, and your life is how events unfold over months and years, and not just particular days. And so, yeah, in the course of divorce, there are going to be a lot of moments like that, and there are going to be moments where you say, "I just need to get this done," and you don't want to do that to the expense of setting something up that 2 months down the road you're like, why did I do that? why did I say I would, not see the kids on the holidays, or I would only take them on Tuesdays and Thursdays or something like that. So, does that answer the question, Evan? What are your
Yeah, no, it
what are your
does.
thoughts on?
Yeah,
approach?
it does, and we're in that reflective, mode. And so here's what we're going to do on the last Shine On podcast episode of 2025.
Mm.
No docket.
Okay.
Forget the docket, Dave. Scrap what you have planned. Toss it in the garbage.
Yep.
No overrated, underrated segment. We're going to look back. Let's be a little reflective. Let's go back and think about the episodes, the guests that shaped us, that we learned from, that provided invaluable insights, not only to all the listeners, but one of the things I love about doing the podcast, and we've talked about it, I know you love it as well, what we learn from the guest. I am a better divorce attorney. I am a better parent. I'm a better spouse because of the information, the nuggets of wisdom, all, the conversations that I have, that we have with the incredible guests that we have on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know which you're going to call out, Evan, but I'll just mention off the top that the bookends of the year are both very, very memorable, and the listeners haven't heard yet our conversation with Pepper Schwartz, but very interesting. It even caused me to look at reality TV a little differently, because I found it interesting that Dr. Schwartz was and still is, I believe, a consultant on the Married at First Sight show, which, let's be honest, kind of looks a little bit like trash TV. Here, two people get together. You have to get married right now. You've never met each other. Let's see how it goes. But she found a way to inject some real wisdom into that. If you look back at the first episode of 2025, we talked to Boston Globe reporter, is it Meredith Goldstein?
Meredith Goldstein, who's got the fantastic, love letters column.
Right. And that was just a cool peek into, someone who has, think of how many columns she's written and how many people have asked her about divorce and love and relationships. That's her bailiwick. That's what she does. And so to hear her tapestry of memories of people she's written to and helped, and maybe felt frustrated she couldn't help, that was a great one as well.
And Dave, you mentioned two fantastic episodes. Going back to Meredith Goldstein, what stood out to me, as I was prepping for today's episode, she talks a lot about how people are lonelier than ever before, yet we're more connected at the same time, right? And she talks about how people send in just intimate details of their life to her, asking for her guidance or advice or wisdom. And she plays such an important role in people she's never met, never spoken to, and spoken with, yet people reach out to her to feel that
Mm.
deep connection. And although we're connected in so many ways, social media, Instagram, Facebook, technology, that deep connection is missing for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a sad sign of the times, but I think most people in their heart of hearts would agree that social media and connectedness and being more tuned in than we have before, it has its downside. And maybe that got kind of blown up a little bit during COVID when people thought, oh, look at how much I can do from home. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it was a little bit of an epidemic of loneliness that came second. First came, oh, yeah, I can do everything by Zoom. Isn't this nice? But if you spend all your time indoors, relationships are going to suffer. And so that was an interesting takeaway from that one.
Yeah, Dave, and after Meredith Goldstein, we had in February, Galena Rhodes, therapist, outstanding therapist. She joined us on the podcast, and she was brilliant, and I recall from that conversation, we talked with Galena so much about relationships and how they sort of erode over time. And we talked about with her, and her take was communication, right? People look to avoid hard conversations. And how, if you do that and you look to avoid those hard conversations, because look, let's face it, who likes talking about things that are going wrong? But if you avoid it, it actually leads to more conflict, more resentment, ultimately more damage by simply not having that conversation at all and putting it off. And what happens over time, relationships just weaken gradually. And it's a recipe for disaster. And it was really interesting to hear her take how avoiding certain conversations in certain situations ultimately is the demise for many couples and many relationships.
Yes, and she talked extensively about infidelity, which I thought was refreshing because it's one of the hardest things to talk about when it comes to relationships. And of course, if you're going outside the marriage for intimacy, it's most people I think don't have a plan when they start doing that. They just they say they're never going to do it, and then they do it. But then more often than not, they would rather jump off a bridge than just go to their spouse and say, by the way, I've been seeing somebody else and I think we should talk about it. They dread that. And so she talked about how, some relationships are not meant to survive infidelity, but some are, and you can come back from that and you can heal from that. So I thought her talking about infidelity was something that you don't get on the run of the mill podcast, but you get it on this podcast, Evan.
No, that's true. And then we went from Galena Rhodes to Professor Allison Lefkowitz, which was a fascinating conversation because we talked with Allison about marriage as an institution and reframing the whole marriage conversation and the evolution of marriage and the traditional marriage. And is it largely a myth? And how does that play into unmet expectations? What's your take on, after listening to that episode and how you think about it, the institution of marriage? And we've had so many other guests on since that talk and conversation with Allison, and we've talked about the institution of marriage. Is it an expectation that simply just is doomed to fail?
Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting in that episode that you asked her, if you had to start over and we were inventing a society from ground zero, how would you define marriage? And she didn't quite say I'd completely tear it up from the way it exists today, but it was pretty close.
That. Yeah.
But it was pretty close to that because it's one of those things where, I wrote a column once during my days as a writer about how maybe letting everyone get a driver's license with very little training maybe wasn't such a good idea because tens of thousands of people sadly perish every year from car accidents, and I'd rather have self-driving cars than people driving cars. So by analogy, if you were going to set up marriage from the ground now, you probably wouldn't have it interlaced into religion as much as it is. You wouldn't have it. You might not have it defined by law necessarily the way it is. But there's still a place for it, she said. So I don't know if we'll ever get her, Professor Lefkowitz's, utopian definition of marriage. But those are the kind of talks that really makes you think about what's important in a marriage and how the core of a marriage is trust and love in a relationship, and it's not legal definitions and rules about religion and things like that.
Yeah. And then we went to the month of March and Lori Gerber. Wow. Right. Where was Lori Gerber when I was dating? I mean, look, she's the absolute fantastic dating coach. I know you were taking copious notes as she was talking, but one of the things that stuck out, Dave, when I think back to that conversation with the brilliant Lori Gerber, dating coach in New York City, was the fact when we talked about dating post-divorce, I took out of that conversation how important it is for someone to heal, right, before they jump back into the dating pool, right? Healing, before dating, when you're divorced, it's not optional. It's really foundational, because if you have not healed and allowed yourself time to sort of grieve, right, the loss of something, right, the loss of a partner, the loss, of a spouse in that way, then jumping back in too quickly, it's not going to work.
Yeah. I thought that was spot on. I know so many people that have made that mistake. And I admit that, I started dating shortly after I got divorced, and I don't know if things would have been differently if I didn't, but I know a lot of people that working through a divorce is hard, and getting, emerging on the other side is something that, you should be happy about, but at the same time, you're going to have a hard time being happy right away. It's a sad thing getting divorced. But I have friends who it's like, oh, wow, you finally made it, and now now you deserve happiness. You can get on with the rest of their life, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm already dating someone seriously, and we might get married. It's like, wait, I mean,
but let me ask, isn't there something to be said for the fact that when you date after a divorce, can't there be different reasons why you do it, right? To distract you, to take up time, to, so you're not focused, right, on what transpired. You might not be necessarily looking to find the love of your life, date one, but isn't there still a benefit on dating?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And it may be the very thing you need is some companionship. And for you to see a window into maybe what life can be like on the other side, I think maybe the key thing, and sort of part and parcel of what Lori was saying, is, learn from your divorce. And when you're dating the second time around, maybe try things you didn't try in the first place. Maybe you can be more honest with that person who's sitting across the dinner table from you. Try to do things that you didn't do with your old spouse, your former spouse. So yeah, it's not so much dating. It's that I think she's right in that mourning period will help guide your future long-term decision making for sure.
And Dave, speaking of trying new things, the next guest was David Lay, who tackled sex, intimacy. He debunked a lot of myths and misconceptions around sex and intimacy and relationships and marriages. And he really opened up the conversation on really how to have the conversation, right, about these topics that so many couples just look to avoid.
Yeah, that was the Schein on After Dark version. Yeah, when we
Dave, you're onto something. I mean, I think right after that episode we talked about about that this was eye-opening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because it's a lot of taboo subjects, and the fact that they don't have to be taboo. And so I think it's an important part. I think we've had many guests who've said, sex and intimacy, by definition, they're an important part of a marriage. They're not necessarily the most important part, and I talked to him. I remember asking him during the latter part of the show about the advent of different kinds of pornography, because judge what you will about our society by this phenomenon, but pornography tends to be on the cutting edge of technology, and we can kind of laugh at it, but it is true. Some of the first, remember when CD-ROMs were a thing? You would put out content on CD-ROMs, and you could get a
Love a good CD-ROM.
Yeah, CD-ROMs used to be fun.
I remember going to my library when when I was in elementary school. Was it microfilm or going old school right there? Microfilm and CD-ROMs.
Yeah, CD-ROMs were just
the good old days.
CD-ROMs were just like microfilm 2.0. I remember I got a CD-ROM about the JFK assassination because I was fascinated by the Oliver Stone film, and the CD-ROM allowed you to go through the video yourself and look at clues and things like that. So, but some of the first CD-ROMs out there were pornography, and because people want it, they're going to get it. And we had an interesting discussion about how could people who have sex disorders and some of the most some of those sinister things that are done by people like pedophiles, could they be curbed by some electronic digital substitute to that? And there's no easy answer to that question, but we might have to have him back on, because I think this is how fast technology advances. We're hearing more and more stories, of course, about people having relationships with, and we talked about in some later episodes, like people having relationships with chatbots.
100%.
Yeah, and that's going to keep coming. That's going to keep coming. We're going to get to the day where you put on a set of goggles, and there's someone there with you, kind of living their life with you. I mean, they're not there after you take the goggles off, but it'll be more, and it'll be the however artificial connection it is to a bot will get more textured and more quote unquote real. And so I thought that was an interesting part of what David had to say that day.
Yeah, and going from David to the next guest on the Schein On podcast, Dr. Brad Reedy, talk about connection. I mean, this guy was great. I mean, and what stuck out, to me after that interview was how Brad reframed divorce as part of the larger journey of life, right? It is about rebuilding. It's about rediscovering your inner self, your true self, who you are, what you want, setting yourself up on this journey of life. And divorce is just one step. It's one part of that big journey, and how self-discovery not only helps you during the divorce process, but as you look to recreate a brand new life going forward.
Yeah, I don't know if you would agree with me, but what I took from that was just a good reminder that you're not defined by your marriage. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of maybe deciding that, well, it's the most important thing in my life. And it may be, but it's not the only part of your life. There's non-spouse family. There's your work, your pursuits, your dreams, your home. And so I think a lot of the people that you represent and a lot of people you're up against are those that, at their worst, they lose sight of that. And, they don't realize that marriage is part of the journey rather than this ultimate thing that you have to succeed and win. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. And Dave, the next conversation we had on the podcast was with the brilliant Stephanie Kuhn. So I have to tell you, this was one of my favorite conversations of the year, right? And they were all good, but this one in particular stands out to me. And if I remember correctly, she was quoted in a Supreme Court legal opinion, a legal decision. And I also remember she was talking about sitting down, having the blackberry pie. I felt like I was just having a conversation. I mean, she was brilliant, right? Yeah. I felt like Stephanie and I could talk for hours. Like
Yep.
the way she was talking about marriage, equality, how marriage was never designed to meet every single emotional need, and how economic and social shifts, how they shape relationships in some respects, even more than romance. It was just such an in depth, brilliant, fascinating, deep conversation with Stephanie, given her experience and, I mean, a brilliant historian um,
Yep.
who joined us.
Yeah, it was great. We don't always talk about the history of marriage, but she convinced me that this is just another part of our history as a society that is worth studying, just like any other subject. And in part, we talked about the great changes in the definition of the family in the last call it 20 years or whatever you want. And I enjoyed seeing her beam with pride, where we mentioned that she was her work was quoted in that U.S. Supreme Court case about gay marriage.
Yeah.
Pretty cool to have her on the show.
Yeah, and then Dave, over the summer we had two guests, Haley Modasser and Jennifer Lee, who talked to us about finances and about wealth management, and really what stuck out to me from the conversations with them was just how much fear that people have going through the divorce process, and how important financial education is when you're going through a divorce, or really in life in general. How knowledge creates this feeling of calmness during divorce, how planning isn't really all about wealth accumulation. It's really about confidence as you embark on this new post-divorce chapter, where you look to make financially savvy decisions and really plan for your life and what's next.
Yeah, and that kind of planning, I think, is the core to the reason why we've seen a rise in gray divorces over the past. We've talked about it many times over the past couple of years. In the past, I think the traditional thinking was, once you're married for 40, 50, even 50 years or more, you don't even want to think about planning something different, a new chapter of your life. But with the right planning, as we saw, anything is possible. And why not? Why not if it's going to make you happy in that final chapter of your life? And we heard how to do it, really.
Yeah, no, we did. And Dave, then we had on Bella Gandhi, who, another brilliant dating coach, the dating godmother, as she is known. Brilliant, right? We talked about how chemistry gets mistaken for compatibility, and what happens when red flags are ignored because people fear being alone, and just about connection, and how important intentional dating is, because it requires emotional honesty. And I thought it was such a candid, transparent conversation with someone who has built an incredible business. And that was the other thing about that conversation. When you talk with Bella, listening to her story and how she built such an incredible business, and where she started, where she is now, and how she really works with her clients, it was inspirational.
And I'm glad you asked her about online dating, because that is such a huge part of the fabric of dating nowadays, and how it's a tool, but it also can be kind of a seductive danger, because it's almost an illusion of, look at all these people I get to choose from. This is great. I just need to have one of them say yes to me, and off I go. I've got a new partner. And that we all know it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, no, it is. And speaking of complicated, and Rachel Glick, our next guest on the Schein podcast, who will come back in 2026 for a part 2. She was brilliant. We had an unbelievable conversation with Dr. Rachel Glick, where we talked about conflict and repairing conflict and communication, and how curiosity changes the tone of disagreement. Rachel was awesome.
She was great. Her book is called The Soulful Marriage, and I haven't picked it up yet, but now that you've reminded me, I think I'll go back, because I think I promised to read it. No, she.
Hey, what are you waiting for? The book's
I
brilliant.
don't know.
I got copies of it sitting on my coffee table in my office.
Well, as I said, as you mentioned, she was such a benefit and a credit to the show that we'll have her back to talk about a completely different subject in season 6.
And the next guest got me into a little hot water, but Dr. Tracy, we talked about her incredible book and the relationship with in-laws and all that fun stuff. And it was so fascinating talking with Dr. Tracy about her book and about the family dynamics and third parties and how they impact marriages and the importance of boundaries in relationships and how most couples underestimate external pressure and underestimate before they get married the family dynamics that take place. And it came out, I referenced my mother-in-law in that episode.
Yep.
She listened to the episode and sent me a text and said, Evan, I thought we were close. We could be close, but I could still not always love it when you come over and rearrange my dishwasher.
Wow, hadn't heard that postscript. That's great. As soon as you said hot water, I was wondering if that's what it was, because I remember you mentioning your relationship with her. Now, you had nothing but nice things to say about her, but
she's great.
And
she's great.
Yeah,
but I need a little space every now and then, right?
Oh, yes, there's a reason why. Why the stereotype of the mother-in-law has become a thing, because there's some natural tension there. You know, the mother-in-law typically only wants the best for you, but sometimes you want to do it yourself, in short. So I feel your pain.
I mean, even the other day, I was a little under the weather, and it comes from a place of love, right?
That's right.
She said, Evan, I heard zinc capsules you should take. I said, sure, I'll look into it. I was never going to take it, right? And then an hour later, did you take the zinc capsules?
Yeah.
Didn't take them yet, right?
Wow, what a good
next
example.
morning, and again, it comes from a place of love, but you know what? There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and that's okay. And she means the best, and you guys are going to be just fine. But I understand. When I was married, my mother-in-law, when she visited, she would begin cleaning our house from top to bottom. And at some point, she'd pause and say, I'm working so hard, but, I've got to do this, or something like that. And I said, the house wasn't like a mess, but when you walked in here, and did anybody ask you to clean it out?
See, those are the things, though. My mother-in-law would do that, too.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Oh, well, all right. See,
if you want to clean my house, clean the house. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop you from that.
Right.
And speaking of great guests, Robin Galinsky, Dennis Becker talked about manipulation, and they were brilliant. I mean, just hearing their rapport with one another was absolutely fantastic. Talked about gaslighting and manipulation and how to spot manipulation and how to see it and red flags. But Dave, your take on that episode with the brilliant Robin Galinsky and Dennis Becker.
Yeah, well, I'll provide the same full disclosure as I did on the episode, and that I've known Dr. Dennis and Robin for years, producing their podcast, Outwitting the Manipulator, and I thought it was a natural crossover moment because so much of what they talk about are these little moments of manipulation that happen in sort of all parts of your life. You're at work, your boss. You've got a boss who's only gives you backhanded compliments because he's trying to put you in your place. And in relationships, the element of guilt or the element of gaslighting, now we have names for all these things, love bombing, and to hear them how they apply to relationships and divorce was fascinating. So if anyone missed that one, it's a good one to go back and listen to for sure.
And Dave, we end the year with Dr. Pepper Schwartz. That interview is coming up shortly, but 2025 was just an unbelievable year of honest, candid, raw, in-depth conversations on topics that, Dave, people just don't talk about this stuff until you're sitting in my office and it's too late.
And more to come. I'm just really excited about season 6. As these things go, to give you a little peek behind the curtain, listener, we've already got, I think, 3 or 4 already of these recorded, and they are among the best that we've done. So, and more great things to come. So,
Yeah, no, Dave, it's been a blast, obviously, as we continue what we have going on, and it's always fun, and it's never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. So yeah, listeners, make sure you please, of course, listen to Dr. Pepper Schwartz coming up in a moment. But also, just a reminder that the Schein On podcast is on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, and there's a YouTube channel as well. If you haven't checked out that, it brings it a little bit more to life.
Are you navigating the challenges of divorce and feeling overwhelmed? You're not alone, and you don't have to go through it alone. You should get in touch with Rhonda Nordegg, financial divorce advocate, where it's all about you. Rhonda helps women transform what can feel like the most difficult time into a journey of empowerment. As a certified financial analyst, Rhonda is committed to guiding women to make confident financial decisions, negotiate effectively, and be positioned to leave a legacy well beyond the divorce process. She has not only helped over 1,000 women that trusted her, but also helped move $25 million into the hands of women that otherwise would have been left on the table. She'll even help you find the right attorney, support you in managing conflict productively, and give you the tools to advocate for yourself. Connect with her today at womensfinancialwellnesscenter.com, because your divorce experience should lead to a stronger, happier you.
Have you ever had a baking oops turn into something delicious? Well, that's exactly what happened with Muffin Crumbles, the dessert that's part muffin, part magic, and all mouth-watering fun. The amazing bakers at Muffin Crumbles take perfectly crumbled muffins, yes, crumbled on purpose, add fluffy homemade whipped cream, and top it all off with delicious extras. It's like a dessert party in a box. And the best part, no rules. Just pure dessert freedom. Spoon it, fork it, or mix it all up. You do you. Perfect for treating yourself, gifting a friend, or just making snack time way more fun. So grab your spork and order your Muffin Crumbles kit now at muffincrumbles.com. That's muffincrumbles.com, because sometimes the best things come from happy accidents.
Our featured guest on this week's episode of the Schein On podcast is Dr. Pepper Schwartz, who is an acclaimed sociologist, sexologist, and best-selling author who has spent more than 5 decades studying love, sexuality, and relationships. She is the author of over 25 books, including American Couples, The Normal Bar, and 50 Great Myths of Human Sexuality. Dr. Schwartz is also a well-known relationship expert on the hit TV series Married at First Sight. Dr. Schwartz, welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
No, of course. And we're going to talk all about everybody's favorite topic, right? Even though it's a bit daunting. And that topic is sex. And let's dive into it. And I want to start with something you've said, which is you've said sex has health benefits. And I want to ask you, how much of that is causation versus the fact that happier, healthier people just simply have more sex?
Well, you're a born sociologist. That's exactly the right question you should ask. And like a lot of things, it's somewhere in between, right? If you're in pain, if you're unhealthy, sex isn't going to cure everything, and you're not going to experience it, as ecstasy if your feet hurt or you have a headache or
Sure.
all that stuff, right? So yeah, there's an interplay between the two. The other truth is that health benefits do come from sex. Your endocrine system gets exercised, your health, your breathing, your muscle tension, it's physical. I mean, unless, of course, you lie there and think of England, there are benefits for it. Climaxes, in particular, are more healthy than just intermission because there's literally, it's like lighting up a bunch of Christmas lights. You plug one in and all the lights go on. And so it affects a lot of things. It's likely to be a sleep benefit. It's good for your heart. I mean, on and on and on. There's a medical literature on it. So it's real.
Dr. Schwartz, you've called for more research on sexuality after age 50. What's an understudied question about 70, 80, or even 90-year-olds that you would suspect would overturn conventional wisdom?
One conventional wisdom is that there's an expiration date for sex, that you're older, you don't need it, it's less important, you're less driven. And so to go to your previous question, what's the dog and what's the tail here? Is it cultural myth? Is it body image? Is it other kinds of things that have affected it? Does it have to be less impactful, less joyful, less physically uh, useful when you get into those ages? We don't know. We do know there's a huge drop off for most people after age 70. But again, is that a good thing? Or the people who do have a great sex life after 70, 80, 90, are they physiologically different than others? Or have they kept up their sex life? Masters and Johnson, the fantastic creators of observable sex lives um, in the 60s, they basically said, use it or lose it. They thought that the couples they saw and interviewed who had good sex lives and in their elder years were mostly marked by having never stopped. But these are observations, from one source. We haven't looked at that ever again. Um, I think of sexuality as a gift. Why should we accept that it just expires at a certain age if we let it happen as opposed to think of it as something important to keep going with? So, I could go on, but I mean, I would love to know the physiology of older people during sex. Is blood flow a big issue? Are they medications that you could take for it, just in the way you would for high blood pressure, etc.? There's a lot of questions that are totally unlooked at, and that is why, just to plug it a little bit, I and a bunch of other people worked with the Eli Coleman Institute on Sexual Health and Gender at the University of Minnesota to create the Pepper Schwartz Professorship on Sexuality and Aging. And it's not me, it's going to be somebody else, but because I think the work really is important and I do want it to go into the future.
No, absolutely fantastic. And Dr. Schwartz, I'm fascinated by the topic because as a divorce attorney, family law attorney, one of the trends I've seen in the past few years is this whole gray divorce. And people are separating, people are divorcing, right, in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. And in part, sure, right, people are living longer than ever before. But I wonder from your perspective, how much does sexuality, how much does that play a role in the increasing number of couples who are in their 60s or 70s getting divorced?
It's a really good question, and I really wish I knew the answer to that. So I'll tell you what I think, but it's one of those things the researcher in me says, yes, let's go take a look at that, right? Let's really
I'm
take a
with you.
look
Yeah.
and makes me want to go right now and design something. But basically, what I do think is you let a lot of relationships let go of all the things that created pleasure in them. Sex is one of them for sure, but also romance, adventure, conversation. You'll see an older couple sitting at a restaurant and they're not talking at all. I mean, I'm not the first or the only person to observe that and think, that they're letting this thing die. And they let it die in so many ways that, all of the glass turns from half full to half empty. There's less reasons to save it. They look and they say, I'm 60. I have 20 years, 30 years maybe left. Do I want it with this person? And if you haven't created a good enough argument why you want to be with that person, then all the things that bother you rise to ascendance. So sex, I think, is an important part of that, but it's not the only part.
What's the most misinterpreted statistic in the field of human sexuality, and how should journalists report it instead?
Well, I think the most important myth and misunderstanding is that people are having lots of sex. They aren't. I worry more about people having sex than having it at the wrong time or having too much of it or having it kinky or whatever. I think it's one of those things that starts to get backburnered a lot. I also think people invent how much they're having sex. I'll tell you a little study I
Sure.
a long time ago on this because I always felt the frequency numbers were inflated, except for newlyweds or people in the most passionate part of falling in love. I say, well, how many times do you have sex in a month? I asked this to literally hundreds of people, no, thousands of people actually over a lifetime. And I said, and they'd say, oh, well, 2 times a week. And that's generally what people say that, so that would be, and not a fresh relationship, 2 times 4, okay, 8 times. So, okay, well, tell me about this month. Well, this month I had a cold, so we didn't do it this week. And next week, gosh, the kids were out of school and so that we didn't do that. And third week we were out of town, we are staying at our mother's. So, um, and the fourth week, we had sex, I think 2 or 3 times that week. So yeah, about 8 times a month. It wasn't 8 times a month, but they're thinking about their ideal type and life gets in the way. So both the frequency I think is unreal, and I think the vision that people having all this sex is unreal.
So how when you work with people, or what's your response for people to own it and be more candid about the frequency of that, knowing that if there was ownership over it, there's something somebody can do and a couple could do to work on it?
Well, I'm not trying to call people, I don't want to box people in a corner and say, see, you're doing it less than you tell me. So I wouldn't do that to anyone. But what I would say is, would you like to enhance this part of your life? And if they don't say they want to, then they've got bigger problems than just sex, right? So we have to go and talk about relationships. I like to think of myself as an expert, not just about sexuality, but relationships, but the culture of your life, the who you are, and all the interesting and complex variables that go into that. So what I would just say is, well, let's think of ways to enhance this in the first way, and this is where I'll often get the most negative response. Let's schedule it. And they'll go like, no, no, it has to be spontaneous. And I say, well, you see where you get with spontaneous. You get, other things get in the way. But if you're Saturday night or Sunday morning or, Wednesday afternoon or whatever it is on tech for a date. So think of you when you were younger. Let me think of it like you're 18 and you're looking forward to this new person in your life. You waiting for a week is anticipation. Doesn't kill it. It makes you look forward to it and plan around it and think about it and get excited about it. So the first thing I would do is don't think of it as, some job you have to show up for at X time, but rather, something that you can embroider and make fun and look forward to and take the time to get excited and interested in each other. If you're not in particularly the mood that day, figure we can talk about ways to get there. So to me, making room in this, making it as a, you're having your golf lesson. You look forward to your golf lesson all week. You can look forward to this too.
Let's talk all things AI. How do you think AI companions will alter attachments, jealousy, and relationships in the future? And what impact do you see AI having on both marriages and divorces?
Do we have like a day to talk about this? It's like
Because I'm seeing it on my
big
end, clients.
question.
And Dr. Schwartz, I'm seeing it on my end, clients coming into my
Yes.
office. Like this is becoming a real, topic of conversation in my office. And I anticipate you're seeing the same thing. And I expect it will only increase going forward.
Well, don't we all sometimes want an escape from reality, right?
Amen.
Okay. So let's assume someone has a door in your room that says you could escape from reality and enter the kingdom of 15th century Japan, or you can find somebody beautiful or handsome and skilled. Maybe it's a prince, maybe it's whatever. I'm going to let that person be an extension of your imagination, and it's gonna have all the things, that some people get from a Hallmark channel or whatever, or an erotic movie. You can this person can become very knowledgeable about you, and they can, talk to you the way you want to be talked to. They're going to draw from an enormous library of who you are and react from all that. How scary is that? Because it's extremely fulfilling. and you don't have to be lonely, and and he or she can say the things you've always wanted whispered in your ear, and on and on and on. It is a pathway to a parallel world. And that, in fact, has dangers because it's not the real world. And the real world could catch up with you because you can't totally exist in this world. You can just run to it a lot. So I do see it. Did you ever see the movie Her?
Great movie.
Isn't it?
Great
And
movie.
and you can see it develop.
Yep.
So yes, we're going to have lots of issues with this.
Let's talk about the reality TV show Married at First Sight. Tell us how you got involved with it, and if you had full control, how would you redesign Married at First Sight to maximize long-term outcomes rather than television drama?
Well, they called me out of the blue 11 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Been a long time. And they said, would you be interested in doing a show on marriage? And I said, well, tell me about it. Sure, I've done a lot of TV. I enjoy it. They said, well, we can't tell you about it because it's an NDA, but let's just talk. So, we had a conversation. I think women who understand say that I didn't take it too seriously because I didn't even put a makeup on for the conversation. That's telling you something. So we have a fun conversation, and then I forget all about it. And they call me back about a month later and said, we want you for the show. And I said, what show? I mean, I've always thought it was like, what are you talking about? I said, well, this was from Denmark. It came from there. They said, we'll send you the show. You sign an NDA and you tell me what you think. So they did. And I looked at this and I thought, how interesting. Everybody worries about commitment. Somebody really want marriage, not just fun or a serious love affair for a year, What if people commit, like have an arranged marriage, but with not their parents making it up or their class or their culture or whatever. But with some people really trying to get a good sense of who they are, as if you were being, to some extent, married by your psychiatrist, for good or for bad. There's actually a movie that has something in there about that that's very funny. But anyhow, I thought, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's see what it's like. And the first thing is I found out how many people are desperate for marriage, lonely, really and truly want somebody, and not just love, not just sex, but marriage, the whole kit and caboodle of what that entails. And so that made me feel like, okay, here's a mission here. Let me see if I can get people what they want. Now, how would I change it? Well, one change is already in Austin, Texas, which is where the present season is. We've put 2 older couples in. And so I've really wanted to do that. The sociologist would say, well,
Sure.
older people, and we can think of all kinds of reasons they're different from younger people about this. Will they do better, worse? Do they bring baggage with them or wisdom? I mean, those are questions,
Yep.
I don't have answers for them and wouldn't have answers for a long time. I mean, can't depend on just one couple. What would I have? I'd have a lot more time with these couples before we have to make a decision. There's so much to learn about them. And, by the end of the show, I know so much more than I did in the beginning because they've been in real life, right?
Yep.
So that's what I want, but that's unrealistic given the demands and money of time. And believe me, we do see a lot of them. I visit them. I meet family and friends sometimes.
Oh, wow.
As much as we can.
Sure.
We have 2 psychiatric interviews with them, not us, independent of us. We really have quite a bit of interaction and knowledge of them. But, would I want 3 months more? Yeah, I would.
Yep. Let's talk politics and love. So political values are increasingly predicting compatibility. We hear so much in the past 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, just how political alignment, how important it is for relationships, especially in the political climate that we're in right now. Are we letting, as a society, partisanship control what should be true intimacy?
That's a good question. I like your questions.
Nice.
And it's nuanced again, right? My answer. We all have flashpoints.
Yeah.
And what politics does is crystallize our values and how they should be enacted. It's not just whether we like somebody or not, or hate somebody, as I'm not going to go there right now. I'm just not.
We
But
might need more than 2 days for that.
yeah, right. And I would get emotional and I would be venting.
Sure.
And so the question is to me, to give people better skills at how to talk about things that they have deep emotional reactions to. And I think if we have those skills, we can work through a lot. I have relatives who are evangelical Christians and have different politics than I, as you might imagine from that. I'm not anywhere close to that. I'm just, your basic liberal Jew, right? But these people, honestly, there's parts of them I don't understand how they've come to where they are, because they're kind people who I think on any individual basis would not follow the values of the politics they eschew, rather that they follow. I have found a way to care for them, and find the things we share, which actually we share more values. We differ on how they get enacted or how people could do that. Furthermore, there are ways that you could, in fact, if you can agree on core values, then you can figure out a way to disagree on how they're done. But if you find out that you have different core values about life, that's a tough one. And that one might need therapy, because, what is it that holds you together? Usually we're with someone we love because they're someone we like. We care about, we see similarity. There's a lot of research that shows that for most people, you're about 80% similarity and 20% not. What if you feel that flips? So
Interesting. Yeah.
so that's the question at hand, I think.
Dr. Schwartz, what should every 18-year-old out there learn about sex that most don't? And what should every 80-year-old hear that almost no one tells them?
Well, let me take a stab at this. The 18-year-old should remember that the person they desire is a person, that they should respect their emotional and personal integrity, that they deserve the truth, whatever that truth may be, as they would have done to themselves. My 10 Commandments thing, the Schwartz version of this is, do not do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. Do unto others as they would have done to themselves. And so take into account the humanity of the person you're dealing with. When you're 18, you're so, let me just get it, let me, and then, sort of dive into the pool and find out later if there's water there. I mean, it's just, you're trapped so much in the urgency of your endocrine system. So I'd say take a deep breath and see, are you being a good person here? And if you can hold yourself to that account, then whatever happens goes. But you've been the person. You should try to be the person who you want to be in all situations, including sexual.
And what about the 80-year-old?
And with the 80-year-old, I would say, by now you should have learned how to really talk in depth with somebody about what you want and what you need and what turns you on and what turns you off, and to be able to have a cogent conversation, and not just futz around in bed, in terms of about the sexual thing, be grown-ups together.
You mentioned communication, and I'm curious, your take on this. There is such a focus on communication as being a key to relationships, and as people work on relationships. Is there such thing as overkill with respect to communication, and does that kill the mystery in relationships and the intrigue inadvertently?
Yeah. I think, again, you can exhaust somebody. How do you feel about that? How are you doing today? Let me help you with this or that. Like, go
Well,
away.
Well, and I had that exact. and I'm asking because I had that exact scenario where I represented, a wife, and her husband just always wanted to talk about everything, no matter small or big. And again, someone could love that approach, but what it was doing to her, it was taking the joy away from just life, everything, interactions, and the romantic side of things was just evaporating. And again, I'm sure there were other things, and I have no doubt there were other things that were happening in the family dynamic. But as she described it, it was a relationship killer because the conversations, one, wouldn't go well, but it was just talking and talking and talking, and it was draining her.
Oh, yeah. And it can be seen as nagging as opposed to conversation. You know, let's do that, just over talking and over explaining whatever you can definitely exhaust someone. And I also think you're right. We all need a little bit of privacy, a little bit of space, a little bit of a knowable self. And I think, if two people continually talk to each other like they're both therapists, it can take out of the just being and just doing. Um, and I think it's one way to deal with that is to be honest and listen. Often a person who's talking that much is not thinking or caring or measuring how much that person's listening. They're just, a barrage of how they're feeling, and just talking comes from insecurity or, I don't want to go therapy on here about all the reasons why someone can overtalk and overdemand. Sometimes it's a tick, person can't stop.
Yeah.
But if they get accurate boundaries, like, I don't want to talk about this now. I don't want to hear more about that. I need you to do X. Let's just go running, and I want to come back and have quiet time after it. And I don't want to talk all through the jogging. I mean, you need sometimes to tell very clearly what you need, and that person has to listen very clearly. You're not inventing this other person. They're a separate whole human being, and finding out what they need and where their boundaries are is part of having a successful relationship.
As we turn the page on 2025 and as we head into 2026, if a couple must choose one ritual to keep chemistry alive, Dr. Schwartz, what would your experience, observations, and research suggest that it be?
Let me say something simple that I think holds a lot. Let me put two. Do you want? You said me one, but I'm cheating. Two.
Take two.
One is um, kiss and hug on hello, and kiss and hug on goodbye. Greet your partner at the door with warmth and pleasure, and say goodbye to them in a way that's connecting. Make sure that you don't treat each other casually that way. You're still lovers, you're still friends. You need to do that, which you would as a friend who would come through the door in the first way. And the second thing I would say, which is part of this, is don't go anywhere without holding hands. Hold hands a lot. Connect physically that way. It's something that's different between you, that you have the privilege of feeling like that hand is welcome and yours is too. Because if you can test the waters and you don't want to hold hands, or you've forgotten how to do it in a way that brings you closer, you're in trouble. It's a warning sign. You need to have affection in a relationship. It needs to separate itself from just your colleague at work or your best friend. There is something between the two of you that needs to be reinforced, and that's that affection and caring.
And let me ask you about that. The simple act of holding hands, how does that intimate moment on a smaller level, or arguably a big level, how does that carry over into other areas and the overall topic and nature of one's intimate relationship?
We're a mammal. We show comfort and closeness by cuddling up. You'll see kittens all together. Dogs will lie next to each other. Animals do that because it's reassuring, and it's safety, and it's collectivity. This is my people. This is my herd. This is something that is home.
Yeah.
And I think what that does is it keeps reinforcing that sense of overall connection by the physical connection. It sets off, I think it sets off a physiological reaction, and it reinforces that comfort of comfort and home and singularity. This is something you might do with your kid, but it means something else there. But even best friends in our culture, not in all cultures, but in our culture, don't hold hands as they walk down the street. They might hold, they might embrace, they might throw their arms around each other, like, after a game, but they don't keep holding hands. I think that reinforces that you're trying to do something really special here.
Dr. Schwartz, if you were asked for one life rule about love and sex that you wish you knew when you were in your 20s, what would you say, and what's the story behind it?
I'd say treasure it and protect it, that it's hard to do, that it requires of you your best self more often than your best self is easily present, that you need to know that you're going to need to apologize, that you're going to regret some things, that you're going to be self-centered a lot of the time, that you have to work against all the negative pull away from each other, and you have to try and find a way to make this thing flourish. Otherwise, you may not break up, but you won't get what you should get from this amazing challenge that is a deep relationship. And I'm not saying every relationship needs to last forever. We're living a long time. We started out talking about that. We may not go to the next phases in a way that works for both people, or somebody may develop a drinking issue and it can't be solved, or they have rage you don't want to stick around for, and nor should you. I mean, there's lots of reasons. You're a divorce attorney. I don't have to tell you, right?
No, I see it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, people change, and then they
People
can't
change.
back, So I'm not this, do it forever thing, but I am saying it deserves your very best attempt, and that will be harder than you think it will be. And at the very least, you should feel that you gave as much of your best self as you could, and you tried hard to make this other person get what they need as well as yourself. And if it doesn't work out, it's kind of like running your best race. You don't just say, I'm going to do a middle race.
Sure.
When I race. I'm going to give it everything I've got. So I think that's what you need to think. It can't be put on automatic pilot.
No, I love that. I want to bring on producer Dave, who I have no doubt has been taking copious notes on everything, Dr. Schwartz, you have been saying, especially, the tips and advice for the bedroom. Dave, I mean, how great was this?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of talk about sex, kind of boring, frankly.
Well, Dave,
we
I know
didn't
you were
not
about to
talk about
spice things, and I know you're going to spice things up with the great segment that we have on the podcast called "They Said It."
Let's do it then.
Okay.
They said it.
They said it.
They said it.
They Said It is the segment of the program where I provide some famous quotes from people, and just to see whether Dr. Schwartz weighs in pro, con, or otherwise. Let's start out with a quote from Alfred Kinsey, of course, one of the pioneers in research on sex. He said the following: "The only unnatural sex act is that which you cannot perform." The only unnatural sex act is that which you cannot perform. Dr.
Well, I know
Schwartz,
what he was trying to get at. He's trying to say that, if you want to stick Article A into slot B and people say it's not good, it's okay. You can do that. But but where I would disagree is saying natural isn't always good. It may be natural to want to smack somebody, but it's still not good. So I would say I go with his general sense that, there's a lot of sexual exploration that maybe the world, turns their, doesn't find appetizing, but it's fine for most people if they're both consensual, and they're both adults. But yes, there are things that you might feel like doing that might not be good for the other person.
very good. And I agree. We're going to give you extra points for that one. All right. Now we move on to
points. Okay.
Yeah, how many would you like? 100,000?
Yeah.
You deserve
Buy
it.
them like airplane miles. Okay.
That's all right.
Yeah, not non-transferable though, Dr. Schwartz. Non-transferable. The second quote comes to us from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, rest in peace, Judge Justice Ginsburg, And this actually is probably on a part of your expertise that Evan and you didn't discuss at length, at least, but on sort of traditional roles in the marriage, traditional roles of women. Justice Ginsburg, unsurprisingly, said, women belong in all places where decisions are being made.
How could I ever
your thoughts on that one?
How could I ever disagree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg? I mean,
True.
of course, I believe in that. I believe that couples are stronger by having two strong people in them, maybe in different ways. I don't think, I think, far be it from me to tell everybody how they should live their life. I would certainly answer their questions and try to help them get where they want to go. But yes, I believe that everybody should be able to fulfill their potential. And I think we're a better world for having women having the same kinds of opportunities and choices in their life as men do.
And Dr. Schwartz, I want to ask you, because to Dave's point, your work has found that traditional divisions of labor in marriage, it can place hidden strains on intimacy or fairness and compatibility. So do you see this problem? And do you envision a day where the so-called traditional marriages are really a thing of the past?
I think it's very hard to have a traditional marriage these days because of the economics of life. I mean, you really have to have a very strong single income to allow somebody to have the grace or generosity or whatever it comes from, maybe nothing's so high-minded, for them to not have any way of earning a living and not doing that. So I think life pushes against that. But I have seen couples where they're thrilled to death that way, where the woman can't do enough for the guy. She's a full-time mom, and if not that, she's a full-time flower arranger, whatever it is. Those two are happy with it. And why would I say, when I see that, I get nervous for women, or I get nervous for either partner who can't make a living because of what you do, which is, it's hard to know if 30 or 50 years later, you're going to be left or not. And are you going to have the skills to make your way in the world and survive financially? So I look at it from that point of view. I go like, life could turn, your partner could have a heart attack in 2 weeks. What are you prepared to be able to do for you and your family, et cetera? So my sense is mostly like, what's the best way to survive in this world? And in traditional relationships, they require an enormous amount of trust, because you have to trust the partner and his health or her health, who's ever the earning partner, that they will be there forever. They'll be able to do what they do forever, and you will be protected. So that's where I worry. But if these two people have found a partnership that's traditional and it works for them, and they think of a way to have an economic savings that would help him or her who is in the non-earning role, I mean, I just want people to be able to survive in a happy and healthy way. If they can find their way there, how am I going to tell them not to do that? Of course I'm not. I just want them to have a plan B.
Very good. Very good. Our final quote from They Said It comes to us from feminist and gender rights pioneer Betty Friedan, who said the following: aging is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength. I have a feeling you're probably going to go along with that one, Dr. Schwartz, but don't let me put words into your mouth. What do you think?
Well, can I agree with the second part and not the first part?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be serious here.
Yeah.
I do think there's new opportunities for strength, and that, my age now is as fulfilling to me as any other age I've been through. So yes, but hey, would I like to have my 35-year-old's body and strength and,
Yes.
and physical and emotional highs and lows in some ways? It had its own glory moments, and, I'd like some of that back, sure. So can I do both?
Yes, of course. It's your segment, and you have the right to do that for sure. And we're going to give you 1,000 points for that one. So you can agree with the second part of Betty's quote, and also agree with Mick Jagger when he famously sang, "What a drag it is getting old." Pretty simple. And yes, I'm with you. I'm right with you there, Dr. Schwartz. At any rate, sorry, go ahead.
Honesty is always the best policy here.
Yes. I wish I had hair. I could show you pictures. When I was a teenager, I had a lot more up here. At any rate, Dr. Schwartz, you've done fabulously well, and They Said It. We thank you for being a good sport. And back to you, Evan, to wrap things up.
Dr. Schwartz, this was absolutely brilliant. You know, I got to tell you, this was as good as it gets. You know, your nuggets of wisdom, the topics. I mean, just everything you've done and you're continuing to do when it comes to love, sexuality, relationships. Absolutely brilliant stuff. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Those are really great questions. And now I want to interview you about what you've learned.
Anytime. Episode 96 of the Schein podcast was absolutely amazing. Dr. Pepper Schwartz, she was brilliant. What an episode. What a season. The Schein podcast 2025 was fantastic. Producer Dave, you are such a big part of what we do on the podcast. I can't thank you enough and all the listeners for being part of this incredible journey as we look to bring you the absolute best on the Schein podcast.
Yes, Happy New Year to you, Evan. But, you know, before the champagne is put away, we're back to work on the pod. So I hope you're ready for 2026. It is a blank slate that we will fill with some great content. But let me just say, Evan, my favorite podcast to work on has been for many years. And I'm just excited the tradition is continuing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Dave. But to thank you all the listeners for listening. Dave, thank you. Thank you to everyone for evolving with us, being a loyal listener. And I will see you on the podcast next year. Happy and healthy New Year, everybody.